This is a Russian storm squad, and right now they are executing a high-stakes mission to clear out armed militants inside a building. The exact moment the commander issues the assault order, a militant suddenly fires a grenade that abruptly tears right into the driver's cabin. Fortunately, it fails to cause any immediate casualties. Immediately after, the squad splits into two groups to launch a breaching operation using alternating leapfrog cover tactics. As the smoke gradually clears following a brief firefight, the squad members confirm that one of their teammates has been shot and has collapsed to the ground. The squad leader instantly orders a magazine change and reorganizes the attack formation, subsequently directing the remaining troops to keep pushing forward in two groups according to the prearranged plan. However, once the squad breaches the designated floor, they discover that the militants have already used a backdoor passage to escape in a vehicle. The mercenaries already anticipated this with a backup plan, having pre-deployed two all-terrain mountain vehicles along the building's exterior to intercept them, specifically to prevent this exact type of escape attempt. The moment the militants' vehicle is quickly intercepted and forced to a stop by the mobile squad, they step out of the car only to seize a young boy as a hostage. Both sides immediately engage in a tense, armed standoff, resulting in a complete deadlock. Right at the peak of this nerve-wracking standoff, a team member named Ivan opens fire decisively, scoring a precise hit on the target to successfully neutralize the threat and rescue the hostage. Sometime later in the briefing room, a video sent by a hostile militant organization in Syria is received, alongside a steep demand from the insurgents for a $300,000 ransom. The individual being held captive in the footage is none other than Captain Gray, the leader of the storm squad who was previously executing a combat mission in Syria. It turns out Gray fell into enemy hands due to a failed mission. While $300,000 is not an unbearable sum for them to pay, the real catch is that the militants designated the drop-off location inside a US-controlled zone within Syria. Within such a highly sensitive area, where they completely lack freedom of movement, deploying a large-scale rescue force is clearly out of the question. Ultimately, the commanding officer orders Ivan to go entirely solo, infiltrating the US-controlled zone in Syria to execute this high-risk ransom negotiation and hostage rescue mission. It is worth noting that Gray is Ivan's former commander, and the two actually fell out because Ivan disobeyed orders. Even though it was later proven that Ivan's insubordination saved everyone, Gray still held a deep grudge and cut off all communication for 2 full years. 2 days later, Ivan touches down at Russia's Khmeimim airbase in Syria under the cover identity of an embedded military journalist. Coincidentally, the very moment he steps off the plane, he crosses paths with the soldiers tasked with the search and rescue operation for the storm squad. Without missing a beat, Ivan immediately uses the excuse of filming a special operations documentary to get himself onto the Mi-8 rescue helicopter. Before long, the Mi-8 helicopter arrives over the designated search and rescue zone. However, this airspace is undeniably under the strict control of the US military. Before they can even make their next move, a US UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter hugs the cliffside at low altitude to rapidly close in on the Mi-8, blasting a stern evacuation warning over the radio waves. Confronted by the Black Hawk's highly aggressive head-on interception, the Mi-8 pilot instantly feels deeply insulted. In the heat of the moment, Ivan calmly spots a lake down below, and a daring plan instantly takes shape in his mind. At the absolute last second, before a catastrophic head-on collision, both pilots instinctively slam their controls to the left, causing the choppers to veer violently and narrowly avoid a fatal disaster. Taking advantage of the violent turbulence rocking the cabin and the temporarily obstructed view of the US crew, Ivan decisively leaps out of the chopper, plunging precisely into the lake to perfectly fake the illusion of an accidental fall. Witnessing the accompanying journalist plummet into the water, the utterly panicked squad leader frantically orders the helicopter to make an immediate U-turn to conduct a rescue. The Mi-8 swiftly doubles back and hovers low over the lake for a long time, with the onboard crew anxiously scanning the water's surface over and over, yet they fail to find any trace of Ivan. Faced with the continuous high-frequency warnings from the US military to leave, and considering the overall situation, the Russian commander ultimately concludes with deep sorrow that Ivan has perished. Left with no choice, he reluctantly orders the helicopter to abort and return to base. Once he sees both helicopters fly away, Ivan immediately changes into an OSCE uniform and heads toward his target destination. With the help of a local taxi driver, he not only reaches the strategic northern Syrian town of Manbij in no time, but he also uses a guide recommended by the driver to buy a pistol and a motorcycle from the black market. The following day, Ivan rides out and tracks down the exact location where the storm squad was ambushed. The sheer brutality left at the scene causes him to gasp in absolute horror. As it turns out, the militants used firebombs to assault the convoy. At this point, the only thing left for him to do is to bury the fallen soldiers. However, just as he wraps everything up, a group of armed militants suddenly arrives in a pickup truck. Seeing this, Ivan hastily starts up his motorcycle to flee, but there is no way the militants are going to let him escape scot-free. They immediately engage in a high-speed chase through the war-torn ruins. During his desperate escape, Ivan ends up entering the town of Manbij once again. Shortly after, he suddenly spots a U.S. military Humvee convoy sporting the American flag driving straight toward him. He violently swerves his motorcycle right in front of the lead Humvee, forcing it to a sudden stop. The U.S. soldiers inside the Humvee quickly fling their doors open, tightly gripping their carbines as they aim directly at Ivan in a defensive posture. Ivan hastily drops to his knees, throwing his hands high into the air to beg for help. Ivan claims that he is from the Republic of Latvia and is a member of the OSCE, pulling out his pre-prepared passport and official OSCE credentials. Watching from a distance, the militants realize they stand no chance against the U.S. military, prompting them to drive away in their pickup. Once inside the vehicle, the still rattled U.S. captain questions Ivan once again. Ivan explains that his purpose here is to work with a colleague to rescue a kidnapped journalist, but they got separated after running into terrorists along the way. Instead of doubting Ivan's explanation, the captain actually buys it completely and expresses deep sympathy toward him. The next day, in order to assist this European ally, the captain mobilizes a security squad of 3 Humvees to accompany Ivan to the designated hostage exchange location to ransom the hostage. Upon arriving at the target destination, the armed militants are already waiting on site. While Ivan steps out of the vehicle to negotiate, the captain also orders his soldiers to dismount and stand guard, ready to handle any sudden emergencies. The militant leader demands the money first before releasing the captive, whereas Ivan insists on seeing the hostage before handing over the cash. Facing a large group of U.S. troops, the rattled leader has no choice but to comply. However, much to Ivan's surprise, the militants actually hold 2 hostages in their hands. One of them, who is severely wounded, is none other than Captain Gray, while the other is Storm Squad member Zakir. Staring at the $300,000 thrown over by Ivan, the militant leader firmly states that this money can only ransom 1 hostage, and the other will require an additional $300,000. Left with no choice, Ivan can only ransom the critically injured Gray. But adhering to the principle of never leaving a man behind, after helping Gray into the Humvee, Ivan discreetly pulls an M136E1AT4-CS light anti-tank rocket launcher from the Humvee's trunk, hands it to Gray, and instructs him to open fire the exact moment he turns his head. As he continues negotiating with the militants, Ivan proposes a prisoner-for-prisoner exchange. However, this particular militant cares only about cash and has zero interest in trading prisoners. Ultimately left with no alternative, Ivan can only turn his head back to relay the signal. Accompanied by the explosion of a pickup truck, Ivan swiftly draws his gun, scoring another kill the exact instant he headshots the leader. At this moment, the utterly bewildered U.S. soldiers and militants also open up a fierce firefight, trading shots purely on instinct. Even though the militants possess a 12.7mm NSV heavy machine gun, they are nowhere near a match for the tactical proficiency of the U.S. troops. Amidst the intense exchange of fire, Ivan lunges forward onto a pickup truck, rips off Zakir's blindfold, and tells him to drive the vehicle. Meanwhile, Ivan flips himself onto the roof of the pickup, grabs hold of the heavy machine gun, and rains bullets down upon the militants. After successfully breaking away from the combat zone, the 3 Humvees suddenly accelerate to cut off and stop Ivan's pickup truck. The captain flings his car door open, strides forward, and winds up his right arm to deliver a vicious right hook squarely across Ivan's cheek. Right after that, he draws his Colt M45A1 pistol and points it straight at Ivan's head. Faced with the captain's intense interrogation, Ivan confesses his identity as a Russian Wagner mercenary and reveals the true purpose of his mission. Having been played by a Russian mercenary and with his own men dragged into a shootout that left one wounded, the captain feels like his intelligence has been utterly insulted. In a fit of burning rage, he lands another heavy punch right on Ivan's face. Although the infuriated captain originally intended to escort Ivan and his crew back to base for an intelligence interrogation, he orders his men to halt the vehicles halfway through the journey. As a fellow soldier, he deeply admires Ivan's sheer courage and his unwavering spirit of never abandoning a brother in arms. Not only does he let Ivan's trio go, but he also hands them a first aid kit. Inside the truck, Zakir quickly utilizes the medical kit to perform emergency wound dressing on a critically injured Gray. Because there is absolutely no cell service and they are still stuck inside the US-controlled zone without any way to call for Russian support, their only option is to drive across the desert toward the Syrian government-controlled area to seek reinforcements. Along the way, an exhausted Zakir and Ivan take turns driving the pickup truck to make headway. When Gray can no longer tolerate his intense hunger and thirst, Ivan improvises by draining water from the windshield wiper reservoir tank to quench his thirst. Once the vehicle runs completely out of fuel, they are forced to take a gamble and head to an illegal oil refinery dotting the desert, trading a hefty sum of cash for a tank of gasoline. However, late the following night, a thoroughly exhausted Zakir accidentally dozes off at the wheel, causing the vehicle to spin out of control and smash into a boulder. This also causes the pickup truck to suffer an immediate blowout on the spot. Left with no choice, they decide to hunker down and rest right there for the night. Early the next morning, a jolted awake Ivan is horrified to find himself completely surrounded by several armed men wielding AK-47s. He instinctively grabs his sidearm to engage in a tense standoff with the group. Fortunately, Zakir understands a bit of Arabic, and after a brief explanation, he manages to barely defuse the crisis. Meanwhile, a large swarm of militants led by their chief is continuously tracking Ivan's position via a GPS signal. Over on Ivan's side, those armed local civilians from earlier guide the trio back to their village. Since Russia has long supported Syria, the village elder decides to provide assistance to Ivan after collecting a fee. He tracks down a usable tire, redresses Gray's wounds, and fills the pickup truck's tank to the brim with gasoline. More importantly, at Ivan's request, he dispatches a local youth to an isolated bridge overpass far from the village to retrieve a stockpile of weapons and ammunition amassed by the village to resell to Ivan. However, as the youth is heading back with the weapons and passes by the illegal oil refinery, he accidentally runs right into the militant convoy hunting for Ivan. Fortunately, the militants pay absolutely no attention to the young man. With the situation becoming critical, Ivan's trio quickly equips the weapons and ammunition, bids farewell to the village elder, and speeds off in their vehicle. Along the way, an anxious Ivan frantically dismantles the pickup truck's dashboard. He strongly suspects that for the militants to track them so precisely across the vast desert, there must be a hidden GPS device stashed inside the vehicle. Sure enough, Gray discovers a still powered-on mobile phone hidden beneath the floor mat in the back seat. Right at this very moment, the unexpected happens. Ivan actually discovers a little girl who has just woken up inside a metal crate in the truck bed. It turns out she is a child from the village who crawled into the crate to sleep after getting tired from playing. This sudden complication leaves Ivan highly irritated, as they can barely protect themselves, let alone carry a child along. Before he even gets a chance to scold the girl, the silhouette of the militant convoy already looms clearly within visual range. Left with no choice, they can only pull the girl along and slam on the gas pedal to flee at full speed. During the frantic escape, Zakir calmly operates the heavy machine gun, unleashing precise bursts to pin down the pursuers. The injured Gray takes charge of rapidly reloading the ammunition magazines. Meanwhile, Ivan dials his phone to urgently call for Russian military support. Fortunately, the connection finally goes through. Without a shred of hesitation, he reports their current coordinates and their destination of Tabqa City to a Russian soldier he had met only once before. Speeding down the road, Ivan clearly realizes that sheer velocity alone won't be enough to shake off their pursuers. He decisively steers the vehicle into an abandoned mosque, fully resolved to dig in, hold off the militants, and buy time until reinforcements arrive. In the blink of an eye, the militants quickly track them down based on the positioning data. Catching sight of the phone sitting all by itself on the abandoned vehicle, the leader's eyes widen as he roars that they've been duped. Before the words can even leave his mouth, a grenade fired by Zakir scores a direct hit on a wall, instantly blowing the enemies behind it several meters away. Right on its heels, Ivan hoists an RPG-22 rocket launcher onto his shoulder and fires decisively, instantly turning a pickup truck mounted with a heavy machine gun into a raging fireball. Immediately after, Ivan flashes a fallback gesture, ordering Zakir to retreat toward the hilltop. Snapping out of it, the militants instantly launch a frantic assault on the mosque. Throughout the entire battle, that 12.7mm DSHK heavy machine gun showcases an absolute ferocity, its deafening firepower pinning Ivan and Zakir down so hard that the duo can do nothing but take cover. The duo prays in vain that a stray grenade doesn't score a direct hit on them. At this moment, Gray's primary objective is to guarantee the little girl's safety. Seeing the militants' offensive grow increasingly ferocious, he decisively encourages the girl to pass him the SVD sniper rifle and ammunition stored in the trunk. He subsequently drags his injured leg to make an agonizingly difficult climb up to the highest vantage point of the mosque. Holding the high ground with an expansive field of vision, Gray calmly operates his sniper rifle to pick off the advancing militants one by one. The sudden appearance of a sniper leaves the frontline enemies utterly terrified, causing them to retreat in absolute panic. At this juncture, Gray instructs Ivan and Zakir to conserve their ammunition and hold their fire until the enemy gets close. After 2 years, Ivan once again complies with orders and follows the command, and his crisp, straightforward response brings a strange sense of comfort to Gray's heart. Under the harsh urging of their leader, the militants quickly regroup and charge forward once again. The moment the enemy steps into their optimal kill zone, Gray instantly screams for them to open fire. Yet at that exact fatal instant, a grenade comes whistling through the air, heading straight for the structure where Gray is holed up. With such a precise hit and explosion, Gray is bound to face grim odds of survival. Consumed by pure rage, Ivan and Zakir instantly grab their AKM assault rifles and unleash a furious, retaliatory spray of bullets upon the militants. Miraculously, Gray does not perish on the spot. Summoning his absolute last shred of stubborn strength, he resolutely grabs a pack of C4 explosives and makes an agonizingly painful crawl toward the densely packed crowd of militants. Ivan and Zakir are sick with worry, desperately trying to provide fire support for Gray. But at that exact moment, a militant agilely leaps onto a pickup truck and operates the heavy machine gun to lay down a fierce barrage, completely pinning Ivan and Zakir down. Before long, the severely wounded Gray is completely surrounded by a massive swarm of militants in the central square of the mosque. As they triumphantly mock Gray, who has his hands raised high, a highly eerie smile is plastered across his face. The resulting shockwave instantly sends Ivan flying onto the ground. By the time he regains consciousness, he is plunged into a complete state of daze. Suddenly, a live grenade comes tossing right over to his position. At the absolute critical split second, Zakir throws all caution to the wind and lunges forward to violently tackle Ivan onto the ground. The blast wave skims right past their backs, narrowly diffusing this life-or-death crisis. Confronted by another enemy charge, Zakir hastily shakes a dazed Ivan awake and rapidly retreats toward the higher ground. Scooping up the terrified, weeping little girl, they quickly hop onto the pre-hidden pickup truck, driving away from this literal slaughterhouse, regardless of the cost. And right at this moment of absolute despair, the thunderous roar of rotors echoes from the horizon. An Mi-8 HIP helicopter of the Russian Aerospace Forces arrives like a savior descending from the heavens. Its short-wing-mounted rocket pods suddenly letting out a fierce roar as countless tongues of fire pour down like a torrential downpour, completely blanketing the entire mosque area in an instant. The charging militants are swallowed up within a destructive sea of fire in a matter of seconds. Ultimately, Ivan's heroic feat of rescuing the hostages entirely on his own leaves every single participating Russian officer and soldier genuinely filled with profound admiration.